For decades, Lisa Bonet was seen as a symbol of quiet mystery, someone who existed just outside the noise of Hollywood while still shaping it from within. But after her separation from Jason Momoa, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. Friends noticed it first, then insiders, and finally the public. This was not the story of a woman unraveling after a breakup, but of someone shedding a life that no longer fit. And the change has unsettled people more than anyone expected. A life that never belonged to the spotlight. Lisa Bonet's story begins long before fame, but it is impossible to separate her identity from the moment she entered America's living rooms as a teenager. She was born in San Francisco and raised in Los Angeles, growing up in an affluent, predominantly white neighborhood where she often felt like she didn't belong. As an only child after her parents' divorce, she later admitted that loneliness shaped her sense of self. She did not feel anchored to one world, and that sense of displacement followed her into adulthood. Acting arrived almost by accident. A friend invited her to an acting class, and for the first time Lisa felt she had found a place where being different was not a weakness. That led to a guest role on St. Elsewhere while she was still in school, and soon after an audition that would change her life. When she landed the role of Denise Huxtable, she was only 16 years old. Overnight, she became part of one of the most influential black families ever portrayed on television. As The Cosby Show grew into a cultural phenomenon, Lisa grew up in public. The series dominated ratings for years, and Denise Huxtable became a fashion icon and a symbol of youthful confidence. Yet, even as the show brought stability and success, Lisa never seemed fully comfortable with fame. Producers noticed it early. Marcy Carey later recalled sensing that Lisa would never become anything other than herself, no matter how large the platform became. That instinct would define her entire career. While many young actors leaned into the security of television fame, Lisa quietly resisted being boxed into a single image. By the time she was legally an adult, she was already searching for ways to step outside expectations. That search would soon place her in direct conflict with the wholesome image America had attached to her name, breaking the image and paying the price. By the time Lisa Bonet turned 18, the gap between who she was and who the public expected her to be had become impossible to ignore. She was still playing the dependable big sister on a family sitcom, but internally she was restless. Fame had arrived too early, too cleanly, and too easily. Lisa was already aware of the unspoken rule of television. Once an actor becomes a symbol, escaping that symbol can cost everything. That awareness led her to a decision that would permanently alter her relationship with Hollywood. She accepted a role in Angel Heart, a dark adult film that stood in total contrast to the image of Denise Huxtable. The project was explicit, psychologically heavy, and openly sexual. When it was released, the reaction was immediate and brutal. The film's rating had to be adjusted after its initial cut, and headlines focused less on the story and more on Lisa's body and perceived betrayal of America's expectations. But Lisa never framed the decision as rebellion. In interviews, she explained that television actors were rarely taken seriously in film and that she felt obligated to her own growth, not to a fictional character's reputation. When critics accused her of tarnishing Denise Huxtable, Lisa responded with clarity rather than apology. She made it clear that her responsibility was to herself, her freedom, and her craft. That stance shocked an industry accustomed to compliance, especially from young women. The consequences came quickly. Around the same time, Lisa was positioned to lead A Different World, a spin-off built around her character. The show launched successfully, but behind the scenes, pressure was mounting. When Lisa became pregnant, the situation exposed a deeper conflict of values. Producers debated incorporating the pregnancy into the storyline, seeing it as a chance to reflect real life and female autonomy. But the final decision was firm and unyielding. The character was not allowed to evolve alongside the woman portraying her. As a result, Lisa stepped away from the series she had helped inspire. Public narratives framed the exit as problematic, but those close to the production later defended her, emphasizing her youth and the overwhelming scrutiny she faced. At barely 20, Lisa Bonet found herself judged not only for her artistic choices, but for her body, her motherhood, and her refusal to conform. This period marked a turning point. Hollywood began to see her as unpredictable. Lisa began to see Hollywood as conditional. And once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. Motherhood, separation, and a quiet withdrawal. Motherhood did not arrive in Lisa Bonet's life as a subplot. It arrived as a full reorientation. When her daughter Zoe was born, Lisa's priorities shifted in ways Hollywood neither anticipated nor accommodated. The pace of her career slowed, but not out of confusion or failure. It slowed because she chose it to. In interviews from that period, Lisa spoke openly about stepping away from work, focusing on her child, and trying to understand who she was becoming outside of fame. Her marriage to Lenny Kravitz had begun with intensity and admiration, but it unfolded under relentless public attention. When the relationship ended, the separation carried emotional weight for both of them. Lenny later described the period as one of deep pain and exhaustion, while Lisa quietly reorganized her life around stability rather than spectacle. She moved with her daughter to Topanga Canyon, a deliberate retreat from Hollywood's machinery, raising Zoe in a space filled with animals, nature, and distance from cameras. During this time, Lisa made another symbolic decision that few celebrities would dare to make. She legally changed her name to Lila Koi Moon, explaining that she wanted something that honored her private self rather than her public persona. It was not a publicity move. It was an act of separation between the woman she was becoming and the image the industry refused to release. Professionally, this period was often misinterpreted as disappearance. In reality, Lisa was recalibrating. She spoke about yoga, introspection, and living differently, not as trends, but as necessities. She did not reject acting, but she rejected the idea that her worth depended on constant visibility. When Zoe later chose to live with her father for a period, Lisa supported the decision despite the emotional difficulty. It reflected a pattern that would repeat throughout her life, choosing what felt right over what felt safe. Hollywood moved on quickly. New stars filled the gaps. Lisa did not chase relevance. And yet, when she eventually returned to acting, it was on her own terms, carrying with her a depth that only withdrawal can produce. The woman who reemerged was not the teenage icon America remembered. She was quieter, firmer, and less willing to explain herself. That restraint would define the next chapter of her life, including the love story that many believed had finally anchored her. Jason Momoa, love and the illusion of a perfect union. When Lisa Bonet met Jason Momoa, it did not feel like a headline in the making. It felt private, almost accidental. They met at a jazz club in Los Angeles long before Momoa became a global star. Long before red carpets and franchise contracts reshaped his life. He was younger, unknown to most, and openly nervous around her. Lisa, by contrast, had already lived through fame, backlash, and retreat. The imbalance was not power, it was timing. Their connection grew quietly. Unlike her earlier relationships, this one unfolded away from constant media pressure. Lisa was drawn to Momoa's openness and emotional presence, and he was drawn to her steadiness. He later admitted that he had admired her since childhood, but what kept him close as an adult was not nostalgia. It was safety. Lisa had built a life grounded in home, routine, and emotional honesty, and for a time that life expanded naturally to include him. They built a blended family that many outsiders viewed as rare and enviable. Lisa and Lenny Kravitz remained close, co-parenting with mutual respect, while Momoa stepped into the dynamic without friction. Their children were raised with a sense of continuity rather than division. When Lisa spoke about her relationship during this period, she described feeling supported and protected in a way she had not before. For someone who had spent years guarding her independence, that sense of safety mattered. The marriage came later after years together. It was understated, intentionally so. There were no public declarations about fairy tales or permanence. Instead, their language focused on growth, partnership, and shared values. From the outside, It appeared that Lisa had finally found a balance between love and autonomy. But the illusion of stability often hides slow shifts. As Momoa's career accelerated, his life began to revolve around travel, long shoots, and constant reinvention. Projects demanded months away from home. Public attention intensified. The pace that once energized him began to clash with the stillness Lisa had worked decades to cultivate. What made the separation difficult was not conflict but divergence. Lisa did not want to chase momentum. She wanted to protect what she had already built. Over time, those differences stopped being negotiable. When they eventually separated, the decision had already been lived privately for months. The public announcement came long after the emotional work had been done. There were no accusations, no public unraveling. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement that the life they once shared no longer fit both of them. And for Lisa Bonet, that realization became the beginning of her most misunderstood transformation. After the separation, stillness, withdrawal, and a different kind of power. When the separation became public, many expected a familiar pattern, a reinvention tour, a visual makeover, a public statement designed to control the narrative. None of that happened. Instead, Lisa Bonet did what she had done repeatedly throughout her life. She stepped back, not in defeat, but in alignment with who she had always been when no one was watching. Court documents later revealed that the emotional separation had occurred long before the announcement. That gap mattered. It showed intention rather than impulse. While headlines framed the split as sudden, Lisa had already been living in the aftermath, quietly reshaping her days. Friends described a woman who seemed lighter, more grounded, and more deliberate. There was no scramble to replace what was lost. There was a release. She reduced her public appearances even further. Acting projects were no longer a priority. Her last credited roles dated back several years, and she showed no urgency to return. Financially, she didn't need to. Emotionally, she didn't want to. For Lisa, work had never been a measure of worth. It was a form of expression, and expression only mattered when it felt honest. What began to capture attention was not what she was doing, but how she looked while doing nothing at all. At an age when Hollywood expects visible effort, Lisa appeared unchanged, not tightened, not reshaped, simply present. Her appearance sparked speculation, but she had already answered those questions years earlier. She maintained a simple routine centered on natural skincare, minimal makeup, and consistency rather than correction. She spoke openly about using coconut oil, avoiding excess products, and letting the body exist as it is. But the real transformation wasn't physical. It was behavioral. Lisa remained absent from social media. She avoided commentary. She spent time with her children, her extended family, and her inner circle. Those close to her described days shaped by routine rather than reaction. Yoga, movement, writing, time in nature. These weren't new habits. They were the continuation of a life she had been building quietly for decades. In a culture obsessed with reinvention, Lisa Bonet's refusal to perform healing unsettled people. It challenged the idea that growth must be visible to be real. And in that refusal, she reclaimed something more powerful than relevance. The transformation that makes people uncomfortable. What unsettles Hollywood about Lisa Bonet's transformation is not mystery. It is clarity. She did not emerge from her marriage chasing validation or rewriting her image. She simply became more herself. That kind of outcome resists packaging, and it disrupts the narratives people rely on to make sense of women aging in public. At an age when many actresses feel pressure to explain their faces, their choices, or their absence, Lisa explained nothing. She continued to prioritize natural movement, African dance, yoga, and routines that kept her connected to her body rather than at war with it. She rejected the language of anti-aging entirely. Her beauty philosophy was rooted in maintenance, not correction, care, not control. This approach echoed through her family. When her daughter faced invasive speculation about cosmetic work, the response was immediate and human, not polished, not defensive, simply honest. The message was consistent across generations. The body is not a public project. That stance, quiet as it is, has become increasingly radical. What people often mislabel as disappearance is actually completion.